Hey traders, Raghee here. Let's get a quick audio and video check in for our charts and coffee for February 4th. Happy Thursday, everybody. Good to see you all. All right, so I could not make my mind up today whether I wanted to go with some pumpkin coffee or if I wanted to go with the Kona pea berry. So you know what I did? I don't choose. I just went with both. So not super caffeinated yet, but fair warning. All right, good to see everybody. All right, so let's get to our charts. All right, so a lot of you have asked, hey, Rog, the newsletter you're talking about, this is it right here. Some of the things that we've been talking about here in the charts and coffee, we're really trying to tie up a lot of the questions, a lot of the tactics that I use, whether that be, is it okay to trade naked options? What does that mean to be long short? So check those out. A lot of the questions that I sometimes see in the text chat, some of them will be answered in the Countdown Trader newsletter. So check that out. But in the meanwhile, let's go ahead and dive into our charts here. All right, so taking a look, and let's see here. This is, by the way, these are my TradeStation charts. I use the TradingView quite a bit. Love those TradingView charts, but we use TOS sometimes here as well. Like I said, I want you guys fluent. I'm not really, dedicated to one platform. I think it's really good to be fluent with the platforms and use the one that is right for whatever style of trading you're discussing. So we're rocking the TradeStation 10 charts here today. All right, so let's get to it. And I think I saw a question about Apple, perhaps, go by. Hang on, let me catch up here. Yep, we sure can take a look at Apple. Let's jump into it. You bet. So Apple is a conversation that's going to be, part of the conversation about the XLK for me, as well as the QQQ. I don't love the structure here, but it's hard to bet against a market that has grinded higher. We have to be aware of the volatility that we see from time to time. So my entry is going to be probably a little bit more on the conservative level, but it's absolutely bullish. And I'm not certain that we may not be better off. So Editor HKT, I'm not sure that we may not be better off. So let's say I want to put Apple in the watch list here, right? So I'll just plug that in. So let's say I want to keep an eye on Apple, and I want to make sure it stays double green. So I'll do that. I think it's going to be really important to possibly consider the importance of XLK as a steadier uptrend, and then it also gives you exposure to Microsoft and the other weighted stocks. And by the way, Microsoft is taken off. So you get exposure to Apple, but then you also get exposure to Microsoft, and you can do so with the XLK. And that's very much, what I like to do, which is sort of dissect the index, dissect the sector, and think about the relative outperformance either at the index level, the sector level, or the individual stock level. And I think that's a really important distinction. I mean, that's at the heart of what I do in Sector Secrets, right? What does that mean, Sector Secrets? What's the secret? It's not so secret a secret. Relative outperformance. But it may not always be at the stock level. Question here from Rolox, who asks, do I prefer TOS or TradeStation? It depends on what I'm doing, right? I try to be sort of platform and broker agnostic. And what that means is I want to be able to use the platform that I think is best for the style of trading that I'm going to do. For example, I have a lot of great tools for day trading on TOS. Indicators that are automatically set up the levels that I'm looking at, volatility levels, volume levels. But then in terms of the options execution, it's really good. Tastyworks is really good with options execution too. But then I look at the TradeStation charts, and sometimes when other platforms are slowing down or they have to be a time delay as not to use up so many resources on my computer, TradeStation, I can run 10, 12 different layouts on TradeStation, and it doesn't tax my PC at all. I can't say that about other platforms necessarily. So every platform has its pros and cons. So, I don't think it's a matter of favorites. It's really a matter of what am I doing and what's the best broker and platform for the job. All right. So thank you for that question. All right. So next up is, Mac. When I did use a Mac, and I've been debating getting another little Mac Mini. I've had MacBooks and MacBook Pros and Airs and all that stuff. But yeah, as a trader, it's not always the most ideal. By the way, that's where TradingView is kind of nice because the platform is on the web. You can use whatever. You can use Chrome and access it on a Mac. But one thing I want to mention, and I used to do this, is I used to run, there's two platforms. I think I used a VMware. I used VMware and it ran fine. So I would run Windows on my Mac, which sounds, I know, absolutely ridiculous. But when I did have a Mac and I used to travel around with my MacBook and I'd have to do presentations and I'd have to present in a Windows environment to show a platform, I would do that. And it was fine. It was fine. All right. So next up, is this my workspace that I mentioned in Sector Secrets? Hey there, Spas. Yeah, this is where I like to. Now, this is not our current watch list. This is just some generic watch list that opens up with the TradeStation workspace. But yeah, this is one of the nice, basic, clean. I can see my watch list on one side, and I can have my chart, my daily chart on the other. I can have earnings right there, as you can see on the screen. So yeah, this is one that I definitely do like using in Sector Secrets. You bet. PG asks, how can I use the V-score with a swing? I usually don't. That's a good question. I usually don't use it solely for swings. I think the tool that I use more for swings is starting off with that relative outperformance index sector stock. And then I will transition to the structure of the market, which is really initially more of a conversation about the moving averages, 8, 13, 21, 34 moving averages. So here's a really good example of a trend that we just got into. We got into it yesterday. But by the way, we got into NEO as well. These are both long positions that we have. Look at the structure. So my swing trades, do I need the V-score? I don't need it initially because as I'm assessing the environment that I'm going to be existing in, V-score is not an environment tool. My wave, my propulsion dots, my grab candles, our history of the JT trend, those are environment. And then I can go look at something like the V profile, V score, and anchored VWAP, things like that. So thanks for the question. All right. Next is Qualcomm. So in the aftermath of, hey there, Chai, in the aftermath of earnings, there's two ways I like to look at earnings, pre and post. And Qualcomm is a perfect example of, we're going to open clearly a whole lot lower than where we were. And this actually makes a really good example of why I like to play two earnings, get flat before earnings. And I mean, sometimes it can be the session of, if we're getting 4 p.m. after the close earnings reports, I can get out during that session before earnings have come out. So this is a perfect example of wanting to be out before earnings and then reassessing after earnings. Am I still open to buying Qualcomm? Probably at some point, but since we're going to have that big gap, I'd like to see a nice pause pattern, minor low, inside day, something that's going to help me fade that move with a high probability pattern. So am I still bullish on Qualcomm? Absolutely. But I do realize we're going to see the post-earnings volatility, which is why I don't like to sit through or make sort of a scratch-off ticket bet on earnings. All right. So thanks for the question. Really important one for sure. So let's see. Next up is GIK. I'm not one to, again, follow news to get into something. If I liked Gig Capital 3, I have no skin in this game. I should like this before the news, And Keith, to your question, yeah, I mean, look at the structure. I sure don't want to be short as a general rule, but I know nothing about GIK. I'd have to know where it is within sectors, what the other competitors are, get a better feel for it. But just purely on the structure of the market, yeah, I would like to be focused on the long side. Yeah, no doubt. So that brings us to something like Stitch Fix, which I believe is actually on my. It might actually be on my my notes here to keep an eye on. And Timothy, yeah, I like Stitch Fix as a general rule, but remember, when a market goes parabolic like this, and we always want to get that read on when it goes parabolic as soon as we possibly can. As I like to say, this is like a high school party. And at some point, the party's going pretty well, but you want to be there sort of early. You get there late and someone's called the cops. That's kind of the way I look at some of these parabolic moves, like a high school party. Yes, I want to focus on the long side. Look at the structure. Definitely want to focus on the long side. I will just assess why this parabolic move pulled back the way that it did and whether or not there's some sort of real structural reason for that. But generally speaking, yes, I'm in the wave and I would like to look to the long side. All right. All right. So then next up is, can we take a look at MERC? Sure. So anytime I'm going to take a look at something like MERC, and I always want to ask this in such a way that you guys understand the context. So I'm going to pull up the multi-chart layout here on the XLV. All right, so I've got this already set up. It's going to pop up here in just a moment. And the idea, let's change the question here. And the idea, Elliot, is that I want to look at the larger sector. That's the XLV. I want to look at also the other stocks within XLV. And I can tell you, when I look at my watch list today, MERC isn't on it. MERC is not going to be on it. Johnson & Johnson's on it. And all my cards on the table, I've got a long position working in MERC, and I'm open to adding in the zone of my buy zone to get long XLV. But what would I like in this? Take a look. So I don't know that I've done a lot of multi-charts in here in Charts and Coffee, but one of the things I want to emphasize is when I'm scanning, this is how I scan. In other words, I pull up the sector, look at the top 11 heavily weighted stocks. Yes, there are some beyond the top 11, but this fits really nice. And you'll notice most ETFs and indices are high concentration weighted, which means your top 2 to 6 names are usually going to comprise an inordinate amount of weighting in terms of influence on the broader ETF. So with that being said, MERC just wouldn't cut it. It's choppy. Where would I want to focus for what I feel is a higher probability setup? It has to start with an uptrend, double green, so Abbott, Johnson & Johnson, Lilly. So MERC would actually fall into the category of a choppy, oversold buy. I mean, this is a yellow environment. You can see here on the history, you can see here in the flag itself. I would have to wait for an oversold buy. And that oversold buy zone seems to be perched somewhere between 77.5 and about 74, maybe $73.5. So it's a pretty wide range from which we could attract buyers, run those buy stops, hit those conditional orders, whether they be a limit order to buy, whether it be, whatever it is. We could run stops down to that level until we find the buying support. That's a different method. That's a completely different way to trade than, say, what I would want to do on Johnson & Johnson. I think the probability of Johnson & Johnson heading higher is, higher. So it's not that MERC isn't a good setup. It's just for what I like to do, MERC won't be high probability. And what do I like to do? I like to follow a trend. I like to think of myself as a surfer just riding the wave into the shore. So that's really where I want to be focused on that. All right. Next up is thoughts on Chewy. Sure. What's not to like? What do we have here? Double green, good support in the wave, green grab candles. I mean, what's not to like? The issue is not going to be right now whether or not the wave is going to hold. The wave is doing a really good job of holding. The issue is going to be, what's it going to take? What kind of catalyst is it going to take to send this back higher? Now, I don't know how long that might take. I don't know how long we might just sort of very narrowly, just sort of in a non-volatile way. Because I mean, I'm looking for some volatility off the wave. I want to see that bounce, right? So how long are we just going to sort of sit here at the 34 EMA high to 34 EMA close and just hold support, which is fine. Give yourself time. I like the long position. We don't have earnings coming up. So chewy is going to be sort of a non-correlated trade, which is fine. In fact, some of our trades right now in sector secrets are a little bit more in terms of correlation. And actually, that might be a really good topic, upcoming topic. And if you have a request for a topic for the Countdown Trader, you want my take on, for example, we talked about naked options, right? Don't worry, it's not a PG-13 conversation. Although it sounds like it, doesn't it? So, what are advantages, disadvantages? What's the difference between long and short of naked option? And how do we scale into positions if it's a credit type position versus debit? Very, very good. I think we got part 2 of that coming out this week. So, another really good conversation, probably to add to this Countdown Trader newsletter, would be the conversations arising now, which is uncorrelated versus correlated. You really do want to know and have 2 lists in that regard. In fact, even I recommend having, you might have a list of names that you're bearish in. You might have a list of names that you're bullish in. Right now, keep an eye on the bullish names. But you also want to have a list of names that are sort of able to exist without really being affected by the broader averages, Dow, NASDAQ, S&P. So chewy is one of those names. And yeah, I would definitely want to overall be long. And then Peloton, I think Peloton's part of that same, Oscar. Peloton's part of that same conversation. Not as good a structure as chewy. So Jason, thanks for that question about chewy. So let's contrast Peloton and chewy. Do I want to short Peloton? I don't. Peloton is actually starting to look, and this doesn't happen often, but what's happened is the market has pulled back and it started to compress. It's really sort of, as you can see, stuck between the resistance of the 34 EMA on the high and the 34 EMA, which stands for exponential moving average, the 34 period EMA on the low. So you notice that the candles are blue, 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 blue. That's compression. That's the market waiting for some reason to move higher. Now, look, could there be a scenario where Peloton moves lower? Of course, but we don't know what's going to happen. We play probabilities. Like I like to remind myself, they call it fishing, not catching. Same thing here. So the probability is that the market's going to continue in the direction that it has been, right? Now, if we start to chop around long enough, I believe that probability starts to drop a little bit, because what happens is that previous bullish bias, people start to get exhausted, they get impatient, they move on, it loses attention, and it loses that bullish bias. But if it's a pretty fresh retracement and it has not been chopping around for long, then there's a pretty good chance we're going to basically explode back up higher. I say explode specifically in this scenario because we're being compressed or squeezed. Not to be confused with a short squeeze, more along the lines of a simpler squeeze. So what I'd like to do here in a situation like this, Oscar, is I'll drop some VWAPs. And what I'd like to do is drop a VWAP from a high and low and see if I have a nice VWAP compression where the VWAP is acting like a vice grip, just kind of holding it in place. And then we can get a better idea of when it breaks through a volume level, not just a price level, but a volume level. Okay. So thanks for the question. Really, really great question. Thank you very much for that. You like the stream? Thank you, Stephen. I like it too. I'm using a different software, but I'll get the hang of it. I don't like that it's kind of compressed because of the darn logo, but if you guys like it, I'm super pleased. I mean, we're trying to find ways to present this stuff to you guys in and as easy a way to consume as possible. So again, gang, I've got to wrap up. Time to head on over to the day job. I'm actually going to go log into the futures room and the sector secrets room right now. And by the way, getting some requests for the next newsletter for Countdown Trader. We look at what you guys are asking about. We check out the questions. So check out Countdown Trader at countdowntrader.com. And I read the comments, gang. So we got a lot of questions about dollar index. That's a really good one. So leave the comments. It's likely going to influence what the next issue is going to be. Sign up and you can get the next issue in your inbox when it is fresh and out of the oven. All right, gang, have a great one. Be good to each other. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.